And then, of course, we have Ketanji Brown Jackson, the woman who Joe Biden nominated based only on her race and only on her gender, insulting, this is tokenism, to the Supreme Court. Her hearings are underway right now in the United States Senate. And in the lead up to this, Senator Josh Hawley released a thread about Ketanji Brown Jackson, voicing his concerns because his legal staff had pored over the judicial record of Ketanji Brown Jackson and found some very concerning rulings in cases where she had discretion. Now, some cases, as you know, when a jury finds a defendant guilty, the judge has no discretion over the sentence. There are parameters set by statute that the judge is bound to follow. But sometimes a judge does have discretion over the sentence, and Josh Hawley's staff, his legal minds, the brilliant legal minds that work for Josh Hawley, found that when Ketanji Brown Jackson had discretion in sentencing in child sex offense cases, particularly child pornography, that she gave very lenient sentences. She was very light. Gave very light sentences to these horrendous, evil human beings who exploited children, sexually exploited children for profit or their own gratification. And in the hearing, the first day of the hearing in the Senate, Josh Hawley detailed what he and his staff found, and it's truly horrendous. Take a listen to this.
Here are, I hope, in the next couple of days, some of the cases from your time on the court, the district court, the federal district court, that I hope that we can talk about. Let me just run through a few of them so you know exactly which ones I mean. United States versus Hawkins. This was a child pornography case where the defendant distributed multiple images of child porn, possessed dozens more, including videos. The federal sentencing guidelines recommended a sentence of 97 to 121 months in prison. Prosecutors recommended 24 months in prison. Judge Jackson gave the defendant 3 months in prison. United States versus Chazen. That case, the defendant possessed 48 files of child pornography. The federal guidelines recommended 78 to 97 months in prison. The prosecutor recommended the same. Judge Jackson sentenced him to 28 months. United States versus Cooper. There, the defendant possessed dozens of images of child pornography and distributed dozens of images of child pornography, possessed over 600. The federal guidelines recommended 151 to 188 months in prison. That's a long time. The prosecutor recommended 72 months. Judge Jackson gave the defendant 60 months, which was the lowest sentence permitted by the law. United States versus Down, that's a case where the defendant distributed 33 graphic images and videos of child sexual assault to an anonymous messaging app, unfortunately a practice that's becoming more common. The federal guidelines recommended 70 to 87 months in prison. The prosecutor recommended 70 months in prison. Judge Jackson sentenced him to only 60 months. Again, that's the lowest level that was permitted by law in that case. United States versus Stewart, the defendant there distributed scores of images of children suffering sexual abuse. The guidelines recommended 97 to 121 months in prison. The prosecutor recommended 97 months in prison. Judge Jackson gave him 57 months. In United States versus Sears, the defendant distributed over 100 videos of child pornography. The guidelines recommended 97 to 121 months in prison. The prosecutor recommended 97 months in prison. Judge Jackson gave him 71 months. In United States versus Savage, the defendant was convicted of traveling across state lines to engage in sexual intercourse with a child and also possessed 6 separate thumb drives of child pornography. The guidelines recommended 46 to 57 months in prison. The prosecutor recommended 49 months in prison. Judge Jackson sentenced him to 37 months in prison. Now, those are 7 cases that represent, as near as we can tell, all of Judge Jackson's cases dealing with child pornography from her time on the district court, in which she had some discretion to hand down a sentence. There's some other cases in which the law, she didn't have any discretion. The law bound the sentence that she had to give. And what concerns me, and I've been very candid about this, is that in every case, in each of these 7, Judge Jackson handed down a lenient sentence that was below what the federal guidelines recommended and below what prosecutors requested. And so I think there's a lot to talk about there, and I look forward to talking about it. Now, I will note that some have said that the federal sentencing guidelines are too harsh on child sex crimes, especially child pornography. I've heard that argument a lot in recent days. The chairman quoted someone earlier today who takes that point of view. I'll just be honest, I can't say that I agree with that.
Now, there are some even on the right who are pushing back against this. Andrew McCarthy, actually, at the National Review, I respect him a lot. I think that his analysis when it came to the special counsel, Robert Mueller, that investigation was incredibly helpful, incredibly valuable insight. But he's pushing back against this, saying essentially that there's a difference of opinion in the legal field about whether the sentencing, the mandatory minimum sentences for child sex offenders, whether those mandatory minimums are too harsh. And he's essentially defending Ketanji Brown Jackson by saying, well, she probably agrees with a lot of people who think they're too harsh, or maybe these weren't cases of the distribution of child pornography. Maybe these were just the cases of consumption or possession of child pornography, which he says is very different. And I was honestly shocked. I read his piece several times because I was shocked to hear him say this, because you have to understand what child pornography is. Child pornography is the sexual exploitation of children. It's children who are being sexually abused and then photographed or videotaped while undergoing, I mean, we're talking this is very graphic. So I'm not trying to shock anybody's sensibility, but we're talking about the rape of children here. We're talking about sexual abuse of toddlers here. We're talking about people who do this because they can profit off of it. People who consume this because it gives them twisted gratification. And there's been an explosion in the numbers of consumers and the distribution of child pornography, the sale of child pornography in our nation. I don't understand anybody who can argue that these sentences are too lenient. These sentences are so light that these people who've sexually exploited children are going to be back on our streets in the matter of years. I double-checked, by the way, with several brilliant legal minds, people that I'm personally friends with. I consulted them and I said, listen, what Josh Hawley is accusing Ketanji Brown Jackson, this is really serious. If this is not accurate, then this is a huge mistake. And if this is accurate, then this is a smoking gun level fine. Then I asked them, I said, is this typical of a judge who has discretion over a case, over the sentence of someone who has been convicted of child sex crimes? Is it typical to be this lenient? And over again, the answer that I got was no.